Hi everyone and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And we're starting this month's story article. It's called Hidden Figures. So it was a movie as well. Came out in fairly recent, last few years, I think, didn't it?
Probably 4 or 5 years ago now.
Where does the
time does go?
It does go places. So, but since we're talking about the book form, well, how do you choose? Because I know you read a lot. How do you pick? Like, what's your next book?
Books people recommend, of course, is a good one. And I try to look at a few different lists, like the New York Times book reviews, the London Review of Books. I get that every month. And so, you know, just lists. And I love actually those end of the year lists. Because it kind of saves you paying attention for 11 months. And then at the end of every year, it's like the best books of 2020. And they often break it down, like best kids books or best mysteries or best cookbooks.
Right.
So that's actually a really good way, because otherwise you might buy too many books or spend too much time finding out what books to read. But at the end of the year, they often publish, you know, the top 10, top 20 best books. So that's a good way too.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's a great way
you?
of doing it. Usually it's either an author that I know is bringing out a new book. Or if you like this, then you'll like this kind of Amazon sort of passing, because I shop on Kindle, or it's just what I can find at the library.
Okay, whatever's lying around or catches your eye,
But today we're reading Hidden Figures, so let's start the story with day one of our article.
Reading.
Hidden Figures. It's the early 1940s, and the U.S.'s National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, has a problem. It doesn't have enough mathematicians because many American men are fighting in World War II. To make up the numbers, NACA hires a small number of black women. These women will not only challenge racism in the U.S., but also make some of the greatest achievements in modern science. In 1942, Dorothy Vaughan, a single mother, teacher, and laundry worker, is hired into the organization. Because of her race, she's made to work in the West area, a separate office away from most white mathematicians. The West area is managed by 2 white women, but when they leave the job, no one is a better replacement than Dorothy. She becomes NACA's first black manager in 1951. Soon after, Dorothy is joined by Mary Jackson. Smart and outspoken, Mary won't tolerate racism. When she sees a colored workers sign in the NACA cafeteria, she secretly takes it down. Mary's hard work eventually earns the respect of the management. She's later made an engineer, a job even most white women cannot get.
So our article starts by setting the scene and telling us when and where this story takes place and what's going on in the world. It says, it's the early 1940s and the US's National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA we'll call it here, has a problem. So we know it's the 40s, so early 1940s means World War II is still going on. It's in the US, and it's this Committee for Aeronautics, which is kind of going into space. So a group of people, the technology and the science is developing, and they think they might be able to go to space in the near future. They're trying to figure out what to do, and they're a committee. A committee is a group of people who meet to organize things, make decisions. There'll kind of be a leader, there'll be a second in command, there'll be somebody who looks after the money, somebody who plans and organizes events, a group of normal people. I used to be on my drama groups committee, so we would choose what plays to do next, figure out who's directing, who's producing, who's going to read the next set of scripts, who's going to print them, all that kind of organizing for the next few years. So that's what we did as a committee. Here's another example. Mitchell joined a committee at school that will organize a dance at the end of the year. So they're all planning things together.
All right, so...
But what's the problem that NACA has?
Good question. It says, the article tells us NACA, doesn't have enough mathematicians because many American men are fighting in World War II. As we mentioned, the war is going on. A lot of young people, men mostly, of course, were off fighting in the war. So these government groups, these government agencies were having problems finding people. In this case, they were having problems finding mathematicians. This is still a time when more men went to college, more men studied things like math and science. There weren't a lot of women doing it. And of course, with all the men off at war, finding people who can do these jobs, these scientific jobs, was harder and harder. And certainly being a mathematician is something we would call kind of a scientific job. What is a mathematician? Someone who is really good at math. Not just really good at math, they probably studied it in university at a very high level and maybe work for some kind of scientific research agency, the government, work at a university as a teacher or a researcher. Math is their career, and they are way beyond 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
Way beyond that. But basically, people who are really good at math, who can do numbers in large amounts in complicated ways, and that's what you need to do when you're designing rockets and airplanes and working in aeronautics. There's a lot of math involved.
But NACA could not find enough white men to do it, or maybe even black men, because of the war. So we see, to make up the numbers, NACA hires a small number of black women. We use this phrase make up here, often with make up the numbers, to mean complete an agreed number or complete a set. And we often use this in a slightly negative way. It's like we don't have the right numbers of the thing we want, so we'll use other things that weren't really our first choice just to make sure you have the right number in the end.
Okay, like you're having a lot of friends over and you only have a few chairs, so you'll use a stool from the kitchen or a box to make up the number of chairs you'll need so everyone can sit around and watch the television or something. You're kind of adding things that don't really fit in the group, but you need more, basically. So these women, these black women that they hired, who are mathematicians, but wouldn't be the kind of people they would have hired back then at a place called like NACA. Well, these women will not only challenge racism, being black in sort of a white world, as America was more at that time, not only challenge racism in the US, but also make some of the greatest achievements in modern science. And not only they were challenging racism, but also sexism.
Yep,
because there weren't a lot of female scientists or mathematicians. So there you go. These women were real groundbreakers and faced some serious challenges, as well as doing some serious math and serious science. Let's talk about this word challenge. All right, a challenge, we often use this word as a noun. A challenge would be, well, a difficult thing to do, a real difficult test, something that will be hard to take on and succeed at. So when we use it as a verb, we're basically saying you're going after something and it's not going to be easy. You're challenging something. It's not going to be simple. It will take a lot of hard work. It might lead to failure. It might not be something that's going to happen quickly, but you're determined to do it. You're going to challenge something because it's important and because you want something to change. For example, people all around the world need to work together to challenge global warming. Yeah, global warming is a big challenge. So all the people in the world, the governments in the world, the big companies and industries in the world, we need to challenge this because it's important. We need to save the planet for all of us in the future. And one of the big challenges that we're still facing today around the world is racism.
That's correct, and unfortunate at the same time. Racism is the hatred and fear of other races and people from those races that aren't your own, but for no real good reason. There's not much justification for it. And it's also the mistreatment of people who belong to those races because of this kind of pointless racism, this hatred and fear for something that's not part of you, basically the other. But women in this story are going to challenge this racism and they're going to make some great achievements.
They definitely are. An achievement is something that you do that is a good thing, a difficult thing, not an easy thing, and you did it. It was your achievement. If you come first in a test, if you win a difficult race, if you quit eating snacks when snacks were a big problem for you, if you do something difficult that took a lot of hard work, that wasn't easy, that at times you thought, I'm never going to do this, but you do, you succeed, you win through in the end, that is an achievement well done. Give yourself a pat on the back. For example, Debbie is afraid of heights, so going to the top of the Eiffel Tower was a real achievement for her.
No doubt.
Yeah, especially if you're climbing the stairs. That would be a real achievement because it's high, it's a long way, and if you're scared of heights, even more of a challenge, even more of an achievement when you make it.
So who were these black women? Well, we'll introduce the first one now. In 1942, Dorothy Vaughan, a single mother, teacher, and laundry worker, is hired into the organization. So she's a teacher, she's a mathematician, she's qualified. She's also a single mother, which makes her life harder, and because of that, she's working in a laundry as like a second job. So we already kind of know from this sentence that Dorothy is tough because of her difficult situation. She will do what's necessary.
Absolutely. She's faced many challenges in her life, and this is just the latest one. Now, because of her race, because she was black, she's made to work in the West area, a separate office away from most white mathematicians. This is how bad racism was. Back then, even the black workers doing the same job couldn't be in the same area, never mind the same room, as the white mathematicians. Most of these, of course, would be white men as well. So being a black woman, oh my gosh, she can't even work in the same area. We got to put her over here. She's doing the same job. She's doing mathematics at the same high level that the men are. But because of the world they lived in, they had to work in separate areas.
However, things did change. We see that the West area is managed by two white women, but when they leave the job, no one is a better replacement than Dorothy. So this grammar pattern, no one is better than, it's just a different way of saying Dorothy is the best replacement. So using no one, nobody, nothing, these kind of pronouns, that's used to mean there is not a person that can fit this description or do something else. And it kind of highlights the, it's a negative word, but it highlights that this is the only one.
Right.
Nobody else can do it. No one else is better.
She's the only one.
Yeah, instead of saying she's the best, we can say no one is better, and that really does highlight her achievement. And so she becomes the replacement manager.
And replacement is the noun form of the verb replace. When you replace something, you switch often an old one for a new one, a broken one for one that works. You might replace the battery in your smartphone when it stops working. If a light burns out in your house, you'll take out the old light bulb and replace it with a new one. Now that new one is the replacement. It's the one that replaced the old one, all right? So the light bulb is burnt out, I gotta go to the store and buy a replacement. I will use that replacement to replace, to take the place of the old one. For example, I lost my smartphone, so this isn't the one you bought me last year, it's a replacement. That's why it looks a little different.
So we know that Dorothy becomes the manager of this area, the West area, and this is a pretty big deal because as we see in the article, she becomes NACA's first black manager in 1951. Not just black female manager, but any black manager.
That's amazing.
That really shows what kind of characteristics she had, how strong she was, how good she was at her job.
There you go. And then we read soon after, Dorothy is joined by Mary Jackson. So maybe Dorothy at that time, Dorothy Vaughan, was the only black woman working in the NACA, or at least in her department. But soon after, she's joined by another woman, Mary Jackson comes along, and she's also a great mathematician.
Right, and we know some other things are about her as well. We say, smart and outspoken, Mary won't tolerate racism. So we describe someone as outspoken if they don't stay quiet when they see or experience something they don't like. They have strong opinions and they are not afraid to share them and tell others what they think. Instead of just complaining about it later or just bottling it up, they go, no, I'm going to tell you what I think about this and I don't care if it makes you angry, I'm saying it.
That's right. And if you tolerate something, you basically live with something that you don't really want to live with. It's something that's around you that's kind of making your life more difficult than it needs to be. And instead of quitting it or, changing it or something like that, you just kind of live with it. You're just like, all right, there's nothing I can do about it. I'll just try to go on with my life. That loud noise that's outside when you're trying to study, or that weird smell of your brother's chodofu when you're trying to enjoy an apple, and it's like, oh, I can't kick my brother out and make him eat chodofu outside in the hallway, so I just have to live with it. I have to put up with it. I have to tolerate it. But it's not perfect. You wouldn't choose to have things this way. For example, I can't tolerate the loud music any longer. Can you please turn it down? I'm trying to play chess and you're listening to heavy metal and it's distracting me.
So here's an example of how Mary will not tolerate, she won't put up with racism in the area.
She's not going to just live with it.
Exactly. We see in the article, when she sees a colored workers sign in the NACA cafeteria, she secretly takes it down. So colored in this case would be another way to refer to people who are not white. It could apply to Indian people or people from other parts of the world, but it basically just means not white people. And so they're saying with this sign, colored workers need to sit in one area and white people get the better area. This kind of segregation, it was called, splitting the races up, was what happened back then, but Mary won't have it. And this happens in the cafeteria of this organization. A cafeteria is basically the place in an organization like a school or a company or a big government building where you would go and get something to eat without going outside to a privately owned restaurant. In a cafeteria, they make a bunch of food every day and that's what you can have. You can't order anything you like off a menu. You see what they've made today and you choose which ones you want. It's usually quick, it's usually pretty casual, it's usually cheap, and it's often the workers of a particular company who are using it. Hospitals have them too, as we'll see in this example sentence. All the food they serve at the hospital cafeteria is low-fat and very healthy. So Mary sees this sign here that's kind of meant to separate the races, but she takes it down.
That's right. If you see something that's up and you don't like it or don't want it or just want to change it for some reason, you will take it down. We would use this for things that are hanging on a wall, for example, a picture or a poster. There's a picture on your wall and you want to switch it or change it, or even just, take it down to clean it off. You'll take it down and then put it up or put it back up to return it to its place on the wall. You might see this also with information signs or posters around your school, around town, advertising something, and once the date goes by and the event is over, they will take something down. In the same kind of way, you take something off when it's on your body and then put it on. You take it down because it's on the wall, and then you put it back up. Up, down. You take it down to remove it, put it up to replace it.
So Mary gets rid of this sign. Now, this could have caused trouble, and maybe she had a few clashes with white co-workers about the things they said. But what we do know is that Mary's hard work eventually earns the respect of the management. The word eventually means in the end. It shows some time has passed, there's maybe been some ups and downs, but by the end of this part of the story, she has their respect. That's where the situation ends.
She basically says, hey, I'm doing the same work as anyone. Why can't I sit in the same place as everyone when I have my lunch? And well, eventually, as you say, they agreed. And she's later made an engineer, a job even most white women cannot get. So being a mathematician is one thing. You're working with numbers and information and data on a paper. Engineer, you're actually making things, designing machines, doing things like that. It's a higher level job. And a lot of white women who'd also been to school and learned a lot of math, they were not able to do this job. She was. So obviously she was very good at her work.
Right. Now, these two ladies were not the only black women doing things at NACA, and the work they're going to do gets even more important. We'll see that in the next two parts of the article, but we're going to leave the story here for today and go to our For You Chat question.
For You Chat.
So the question is, do you think all people have the same opportunities in Taiwan? Why or why not?
Tough question, but I would say all people in most countries, in every country, don't have the same opportunities, right? We always judge people based on all sorts of stuff. The color of their skin, or if they're a man or a woman, like in our story here, if they're tall or short, good looking or not so attractive, if they're, healthy or unwell in some kind of way, physical problem. No one really is fully allowed to do all the things that they can do because other people, depending on who they are in the situation, look at them and, judge them in some kind of way. It's a very difficult thing to get around.
That is true. I guess one thing that pops up into my head here is that it's difficult for Mike and I, extremely difficult, if we ever wanted to be citizens of Taiwan.
True, yeah.
We would basically have to give up our own citizenships, pretty much. There are one or two ways around it, but they're very hard. So therefore, we'll never be able to vote, we'll never be able to take part in a government job, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, Taiwanese people can get citizenship in our countries, in the States, in others, a lot more easily. So that doesn't quite seem to balance out. I mean, there are reasons for it, good ones, bad ones, all kinds of ones, but it's an example of how not everybody can have a completely open every opportunity available to play with.
One example of many,
Right.
yes.
There are many things more we could say about that, but we're out of time right now. Join us again tomorrow for part 2 of Hidden Figures. See you then. Bye for now.
Take care.
Vocabulary Review. Committee. The village committee meets 4 times a year to discuss the events it will hold. Challenge. The judge challenged the man's story about the crime because there were parts which seemed unlikely. Achievement. The soccer player's greatest achievement was scoring more goals than anyone else in a season. Replacement. Jim has done a great job for the company. His replacement will have to work hard to match him. Tolerate. The school made it very clear that it won't tolerate students being rude to teachers. Cafeteria. Ian usually likes to meet his friends from other departments for lunch in the office cafeteria.
智慧小补帖
Mathematician. Racism. Outspoken. Eventually.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作。活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net